President Trump doing a 180 on Harley Davidson this morning, unleashing on Twitter after the American motorcycle company announced it was moving some production overseas to avoid tariffs from the European Union. Those tariffs, of course, a response to the Trump administration's tariffs on steel and aluminum. CNN's Tom Foreman has the story.
I think the people that ride Harleys are not happy with Harley Davidson, and I wouldn't be either.
Trump just destroyed Harley Davidson with massive tariffs slapping $175 million in costs. Harley thought going overseas would save them, but that single desperate move cost them billions. Now the same tariffs they tried to dodge are sucking the life out of the brand and leaving it gasping for survival. Harley Davidson once stood for rebellion, freedom, and grit. For over a century, Harley sold itself as the ultimate symbol of American toughness, a bike that roared louder than a bald eagle on the 4th of July. The company was wrapped in stars and stripes, and for decades that worked. People didn't just buy a motorcycle, they bought into a whole identity. Leather jackets, tattoos, the open road, and that iconic sound, it was all Harley. For generations, it was the closest thing to buying freedom in the form of two wheels. Even Trump bought into that image at first. Back in February 2017, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Harley executives and called the company a symbol of American grit. He praised them as proof that American manufacturing was alive and well. That moment looked like the perfect marriage between a president selling patriotism and a company selling American muscle. But fast forward to 2018, and that praise turned into a public beatdown. Why? Because Harley made the genius decision to shift production overseas. Instead of doubling down on its American legacy, it decided to play games with globalization. Trump, who basically built his political brand on Made in America, wasn't going to let that slide. He blasted Harley and called their move the beginning of the end. And honestly, can you blame him? One year you're posing with the president, the next you're being ripped apart on his Twitter feed. That's what happens when you flip-flop on your own identity. And here we are in 2025, with Harley pulling its full-year forecast because of Trump's tariff war. They're facing an estimated $130 million to $175 million hit thanks to tariffs, and the company doesn't even know where it's going financially. Imagine that. An iconic company that survived wars, recessions, and the Japanese motorcycle invasion of the 80s, now folding under tariff pressure because they abandoned the very thing that made them great in the first place. It's not just about numbers, it's about betrayal. They sold out their roots, and now they're paying for it. Now, let's go back to that betrayal moment in 2018, because that's when Harley really started digging its own grave. The European Union decided to raise tariffs on American motorcycles from 6% to 31% in June 2018. That was a big jump, no doubt, but instead of holding strong and fighting for its American workers, Harley jumped ship. They opened a shiny new plant in Thailand, claiming it was only for international markets. Of course, that was a lie, because soon enough, foreign-built Harleys were spotted right here in the USA. So while customers thought they were buying all-American steel, what they were really getting was a Made in Thailand label hiding under the Harley badge. And let's not forget what Harley did back home. They shut down the Kansas City plant, leaving hard-working American employees jobless. At the same time, they were ramping up operations in Brazil and India. So while American workers were packing up their toolboxes, Harley was busy handing out job applications overseas. That's not strategic business. That's betrayal dressed up as corporate spin. You don't shut down factories in your own country and then brag about opening new ones in Thailand. That's the kind of thing that makes loyal riders feel like they've been slapped in the face. Trump wasn't having it. He went off on Twitter, calling Harley out multiple times and warning them that if they abandoned U.S. soil, they'd face severe taxes selling back into the country. He wasn't just angry as a politician. He was speaking for every leather-jacketed, flag-waving rider who felt sucker punched by a brand they thought would never sell them out. Harley could have stood tall, but instead, it chose to cave, and the punishment was swift. Investors tanked their stock, which nosedived 18% in 2018. That's not a minor dip. That's a warning flare in the night sky. 18% is what happens when the market says, "We don't believe you anymore." It wasn't just a money problem, it was a full-on identity crisis, and the problems didn't stop there. Trump's tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum were supposed to protect American jobs. That was the whole point. But Harley twisted that into an excuse to move more production overseas. Instead of saying, "We'll weather this storm and stay loyal to our workers," Harley basically said, "Nah, too hard. Let's go global." That was the moment Trump declared war on Harley. He didn't sugarcoat it either. He flat out said Harley betrayed not just America, but the writers who built their empire. Think about Harley's customer base. In 2017, 61% of its total sales came from the American market. 61%. That means more than half of their money was coming from Americans, the very people waving the flags, revving the engines, and keeping the Harley culture alive. And instead of appreciating that, Harley decided to chase the other 39% around the globe. They ignored their army of loyal supporters in exchange for markets that didn't even care about Harley's legacy. That's not just dumb, that's suicidal. And the numbers today prove it. In the first quarter of 2025, Harley's shipments collapsed by 39%. They went from 41,577 units down to just 24,865. That's not a slowdown, that's a free fall. Retail sales also dropped 21%, and revenue was down 23%, sitting at just $1.33 billion. Billion might sound like a lot, but not when you're a company that used to dominate the motorcycle industry. Those numbers scream failure. They scream betrayal coming home to roost. So here's what we've got. Harley Davidson, once the pride of America, praised by the president himself in 2017, turned its back on American workers and its loyal fan base in 2018. They thought moving to Thailand, Brazil, and India would save them from tariffs, but all it did was destroy their credibility. Trump called them out, writers turned their backs, investors bailed, and now in 2025, the company is taking massive hits from tariffs, losing sales, and bleeding revenue. Harley used to be the brand of rebellion, but now it's the brand of excuses. What was once the sound of freedom is now the sound of a company choking on its own bad decisions. Harley's desperate pivot into the future wasn't a bold strategy. It was pure panic. The company that once sold rebellion and raw steel suddenly decided it wanted to be a global lifestyle brand, complete with electric bikes, climate pledges, and corporate buzzwords. Instead of doubling down on what made Harley iconic, they thought the path forward was chasing global expansion, embracing an EV future, and throwing in a dose of woke PR just to make it extra confusing. It's almost like they looked at their own reflection and said, "You know what would make us cooler? If we stop being Harley." That's not reinvention, that's self-sabotage. Electric bikes might sound innovative to a Silicon Valley investor, but to Harley's core writers, they looked ridiculous. Imagine trading that legendary potato rumble for a silent scooter with fake revving noises pumped through speakers. That's what Harley gave the world, synthetic engine sounds. Writers called them blenders on wheels, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Who in their right mind wants to pay 30 grand for a blender that pretends it's a motorcycle? That's not innovation, that's a corporate comedy sketch. And then came the dealerships. Remember when Harley shops used to be gritty shrines to torque, chrome, and rebellion? You'd walk in and smell motor oil, hear engines being tuned, and see mechanics covered in grease. Now, Harley decided that wasn't modern enough. They started turning their dealerships into hipster showrooms, complete with mood lighting, branded lattes, and even yoga classes. Yes, yoga classes, because nothing says biker rebellion like downward dog next to a $25,000 cruiser. Instead of attracting new blood, Harley was just confusing the old guard and failing to win over the young crowd. A Harley dealership used to feel like a garage. Now it feels like an Apple store cosplaying as a biker bar. But here's the problem. The younger crowd wasn't buying it, literally. Millennials and Gen Z are already drowning in student loans, sky-high rents, and inflation. They're not dropping $20,000 to $30,000 on luxury toys, no matter how many lattes Harley serves them. The dream of winning over a new generation with overpriced electric bikes and mood-lit showrooms crashed harder than a rookie rider stalling in traffic. Harley miscalculated big time. They thought slapping a Tech Future sticker on their brand would magically attract Gen Z, but all they did was alienate their loyal core while failing to recruit the new generation. The result was cultural bankruptcy. Harley went from being a biker brotherhood, a family passed down through generations, to a hollow lifestyle brand that nobody trusted. They traded grease for Instagram filters, power for PR, and authenticity for cheap gimmicks. The roar was gone, the rebellion was gone, and the culture was gone. All that was left was a company trying to cosplay as itself and failing miserably. And as if that wasn't enough humiliation, the year 2025 came around with a sledgehammer. Trump's 145% tariff on Chinese components hit Harley right where it hurt. The global trade wars pushed costs through the roof, and Harley had no way to hide from it. The company had to pull its entire 2025 forecast, admitting it couldn't even predict the future anymore. Imagine telling your investors, "Sorry, we have no clue how we're going to make money this year." That's not leadership, that's surrender. A brand that once bragged about being unbreakable was suddenly waving the white flag. Even after all this chaos, Harley still managed to beat EPS expectations. They posted $1.07 per share, which sounds fine until you realize it was down from $1.72 just a year earlier. That's a massive drop. It's like bragging about winning a race when you actually came in third. The numbers might have looked decent on the surface, but anyone paying attention saw the cracks spreading wide open. Investors weren't cheering, they were nervous. Nervous because Harley's entire foundation was crumbling under tariff pressure. Then came the leadership meltdown. CEO Jochen Seitz, the guy who was supposed to steer Harley through the storm, announced his retirement. Activist investors at H Partners basically forced the issue, demanding a shakeup at the top because the board was failing to stop the free fall. When a company's investors are trying to boot the CEO and longtime board members, that's not a restructuring, it's a mutiny. Harley wasn't just losing sales, it was losing faith from the very people financing its survival. To make matters even more desperate, Harley floated the idea of selling off its financial services arm, a division worth up to $1 billion. Think about that. They're so strapped for cash and direction that they're considering pawning off one of their few profitable pieces just to keep the lights on. That's not strategy, that's desperation dressed up as corporate restructuring. Harley, once the proud American icon, is now trying to sell parts of itself just to stay alive, and here's where the story really twists the knife. Back in the 1980s, Harley was saved by patriotic tariffs. The US government slapped tariffs on Japanese imports, giving Harley a chance to catch its breath and rebuild its reputation on American craftsmanship. Tariffs were their lifeline. Fast forward to today, and tariffs are the very thing destroying them. It's poetic irony, and not the good kind. The same weapon that once saved Harley is now tearing it apart because they forgot the rule. You can't betray the people who keep you alive and expect them to cheer for you later. And that brings us to the closing punch. Harley Davidson's fall proves something brutal. When an American icon forgets who it serves, it's not just a stumble, it's a funeral in slow motion. They were once the loudest voice of rebellion on the highway. Now they're the quiet whimper of a company that traded authenticity for corporate nonsense and lost everything that mattered along the way. Harley's collapse is just getting started, so hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more brutal takedowns.